Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to the public and members of the media, and thank you for the attendance at this press conference. Following the November 5th speech from the throne, I would like to update everyone on last year's initiatives and highlight how the Ministry of Home Affairs plans to introduce a Marine Development Act and highlight how the Ministry of Home Affairs is going to facilitate the initiatives and a number of developments for this upcoming legislative year, particularly in the areas of renewable energy, marine development, and other interesting initiatives that we outlined in the throne speech for this year. Last year's throne speech was focused on 4 initiatives: the consumer protection for loans and mortgages, the subsea cable fees regime, modernizing the landlord and tenant legislation, and training for level 1 PV solar installers. Around the issues of consumer protection on loans and mortgages, and concerning the conduct towards customers in the case of consumer protection for loans and mortgages, I can advise everyone that this responsibility is now in the hands of the Bermuda Monetary Authority. Consumer Affairs, of course, will continue to play a very important role with dealing with consumer complaints and also working with the BMA and the Ministry of Finance around banking conduct. In relation to the subsea cable regime, I am pleased to inform the public that the Subsea Communications Cables Act 2020 was passed and is now in operation. The application process has also been published and is under the purview of the Regulatory Authority of Bermuda. Modernizing landlord and tenant legislation. On modernizing that body of legislation, the public will know that since the 1990s, the rental market has really changed significantly. In contrast, however, this legislation has not kept up with the current changes and, in fact, was first put in place in 1974. So as you can appreciate, it is pretty old legislation. As with most jurisdictions, disputes between landlord and tenants have increased, and legislation is needed to address these issues and provide adequate guidance and protection for both landlords and tenants. During the last year, the economic impact suffered by residents has highlighted the ambiguity in certain acts and the need for updated legislation. A more comprehensive act will enable Consumer Affairs to better assist landlords and tenants by giving clear guidance on settling rental disputes and potentially avoiding going to civil court. Responsibility for enforcement of the 2 acts currently falls with the courts and not with the Department of Consumer Affairs. Hence, landlords and tenants have little option but to resort to the courts to settle disputes because of the lack of clear direction from this body of legislation. The court process, unfortunately, can be long, is generally not that user-friendly, and can prove to be expensive, with no guarantee of a positive outcome for either party. The updated act will introduce emergency enforcement powers for Consumer Affairs, who can now only do the best but conciliate issues that arise, but cannot enforce any remedies whatsoever. Despite this, most landlords and tenants, in our view, have been fair and respectful to each other in their relationships. However, there have been some instances where some landlords have committed unfortunate, heinous acts, and I'll just describe some of them. Shutting off of water and electricity, removing windows and doors as a way to force tenants to leave, and putting tenants' belongings out on the street. Likewise, some tenants themselves have indulged in illegal activities or engaged in intimidation against elderly landlords in particular. These occurrences require immediate intervention by an authority where there has been some sort of contravention of the legislation. Approvals are being sought from Cabinet, after which the drafting of the legislation will occur, and I expect that to happen within the not-too-distant future. When it comes to training of Level 1 solar installers, the public will recall the goals proposed by the regulatory authority in the Integrated Resource Plan, known as the IRP, as a roadmap for future utility-scale energy development for Bermuda. The only way Bermuda will meet its goals and share the prosperity of a self-sufficient energy future is by investing now in our local talent pool and building the capacity of trained Bermudians who will be vital to achieving our goal of a self-sufficient energy and clean energy future. To that end, the public will recall with some excitement I announced on July 7th when I introduced the free solar photovoltaic or PV certification training program held in partnership with Connect Tech. And later that month, I congratulated 20 students who had completed that training. During the application phase of the solar photovoltaic or PV certification program, we recognized that many who applied for the program did not have the requisite electrical and construction experience which was necessary to do the program. With the experience being essential for the course, many were unable to be accepted into the program. As an alternative, the Ministry of Home Affairs, through the Department of Energy, undertook an initiative with the Construction Association of Bermuda to offer a course of study through NCCER, the National Center for Construction and Education and Research. While initially planned to begin this fall, COVID-related challenges have required the course to start much later than we anticipated, in the early new year of 2022. Despite this minor setback, I am confident to say that we are on our way to ensuring that Bermuda will have qualified and capable pool of workers to meet the needs of our clean, renewable, self-sufficient energy future. Now, in relation to the items in the 2021 throne speech, those were my initiatives from last year. I'm not going to talk about the ones going forward. As stated in the 2021 throne speech, and in line with Bermuda's economic recovery plan, the Ministry of Home Affairs will focus its efforts on introducing a Marine Development Act and a bill to facilitate the development of innovation and Bermuda as a test bed for renewable energy technology. When it relates to the Marine Development Act, before expanding on that, I would like to begin in what I feel is the most thoughtful and relevant quote around this issue of the environment, around climate change, and around the issues that the globe, not only Bermuda, faces. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. That is a well-known Native American quote. And with that in mind, the Marine Development Act will include a marine spatial plan identifying 20% of area to be protected in Bermuda's exclusive economic zone, known as the EEZ. The Act will also create a framework to balance development with sustainability, providing an application process for investments in fishing, offshore renewable energy, and blue tourism. The process will guide ocean use management across the EEZ, drawing on local expertise and utilizing an environmental impact process and procedure akin to what is already in a part of our land planning process and incorporated into the Bermuda Plan and law already. This is a timely initiative in light of the recent events around the COP26 Conference of Parties conference, which was in Glasgow, Scotland. Bermuda's unique marine environment and marine cultural heritage define us as an island community, as an island nation. Well-known traditional maritime activities such as shipping, fishing, marine tourism, boating, swimming, diving, and snorkeling are a part of what we do. However, there are also new opportunities in the marine environment, which can be commercial in nature. These include, again, fishing, offshore, renewable energy, and blue tourism, in addition to mariculture, more commonly known as fish farming, that could contribute to job creation and new economic activity, economic diversification, and of course, a very important issue of food security. Any development in the marine environment must be sustainable and not jeopardize the ocean and coastal areas' environmental services provided for our island. We must protect our coastal areas. And coastal protection, removing carbon from the atmosphere, waste disposal, and its intrinsic value are also part of what we are interested in doing. The recommendation to ensure sustainability while managing overlapping and evolving needs of different ocean user groups and stakeholders is to develop a coherent blue economy plan to direct long-term management and economic growth. The United Nations Education and Scientific and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO, defines Marine Spatial Plan, or MSP, as a public process of analyzing and allocating the spatial and temporal distribution of human activities in marine areas to achieve economic, social, and environmental objectives that are usually specified through the political process. MSP adds planning and public consultation elements to ecosystem management, producing an overarching system of sea use management, which is a fundamental tenet to the development of a transparent process to allow sustainable multiple uses of the marine environment with minimal user conflict achieved through environment with stakeholder output as part of the process. Regular reviews will enable the system to accommodate new maritime activities or adapt to changes such as those brought about by climate change and other consequences of large-scale human development. An important consideration is integrating the management of coastal zones to take into account the impacts of land-based activities on the marine environment, which is beyond the jurisdiction of the current Bermuda Plan, 2008. The Marine Spatial Plan will be managed similar to the Department of Planning's Bermuda Plan. That is, to conserve and protect areas while encouraging sustainable development in others. You will often hear the refrain that for all of our plans to protect, we do not have the resources to manage and enforce these protections. I am actually pleased today to advise the public that this is going to come to an end. You have heard or seen the press release that Bermuda is to be the first territory to be a part of the UK's joint Blue Shield program. The Blue Shield program will identify and analyze activities within our EEZ that may impact the health and sustainability of these biodiverse marine environments. It will provide a complete picture of marine activities to the territories. And this is a program that's going to be afforded to all of the overseas territories by the UK government, but we are the first to be a part of it, which will allow improved management of the waters around Bermuda. The activities surveyed could include illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing, which is IUU, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, commercial and recreational vessel activity, shipping activity. So the program will assist us with monitoring all those activities if they arise within Bermuda's waters. Through establishing compliance and enforcement frameworks, Blue Shield will actively monitor activities, assisting us to ensure environmental regulations are met and, where necessary, help us with enforcement to take action against noncompliance. Our Blue Shield initiative will be supported through specialist staff training to build local capacity and access innovative surveillance and enforcement techniques. Just to put that in more plain language, we will be training Bermudians to operate this program. It will not be operated by non-Bermudians. There will be obviously technical training from overseas initially, but it will be Bermudians and locals operating the Blue Shield program and the technology that will come with it. These will include autonomous drone technology that can monitor vast ocean areas for human activity and report findings in real time, and passive acoustic units, which, once developed underwater, can monitor the sounds of vessels through their GPS positioning systems turned off. And some people may not be aware, but BIOS actually operates a similar type of technology in their own research. So it's the same technology, and we will have the opportunity to have that from the UK government, who are developing actual custom-made drones, at least 2 for us, that we will use in our waters. Furthermore, the latest satellite surveillance data can also be used to monitor marine activity across the entire exclusive economic zone. And when it comes to renewable energy technology and legislation that we're developing in that area, also during this session, as part of the Bermuda Economic Recovery Plan, the government will introduce a bill to facilitate the developers of renewable energy technology and using Bermuda as a test bed for their products. This legislation will lay the groundwork for additional investment in Bermuda, whose innovation can reduce the cost of electricity for local consumers. Concerning this, new regulations will address the fuel surcharge cost of electricity, which everybody, I think, knows about, and better regulate the storage and distribution of fuel to reduce energy costs for Bermuda's residents and businesses. The public will know that long before the effects of COVID-19, this government recognized the need to find ways to attract both local entrepreneurs and foreign investment innovators to do business in Bermuda. Recent circumstances have made these efforts even more pressing and require us to change our legislative model to attract innovative entrepreneurs to our shores. Energy forms the backbone support for all other industries and activities, and is a sector ripe for additional development in our environment. This is especially true as we aspire to fulfill the goals of the Integrated Resource Plan. If we don't move towards a more diversified energy future with more renewables, investment in the energy sector will not happen with just sticking with fossil fuels, everyone. If we want to have growth and change in our energy sector, we have to attract investment, whether internal to Bermuda or from outside. But it's through the incorporation of renewable energy this new investment will come. Recent innovators have been seeking to develop creative solutions to electricity generation offshore in our oceans. Next week, I will have the pleasure of introducing one such developer. These solutions range from floating solar photovoltaic panels and floating offshore wind installations to ocean wave technology. If proven to be operationally feasible and economically viable, these innovations could change the whole game of energy future for Bermuda and the future of electricity generation. These new initiatives will also attract investment and have the potential to create a considerable amount of jobs. Currently, 42(3)(b) of the Electricity Act of 2016, which governs requests for comments and other generation proposals, states, and this is what the current legislation says, any person that submits a proposal pursuant to a notice under this subsection shall, in that proposal, demonstrate how it uses technology that is in commercial operation in another jurisdiction. So right now the Act stops innovation, it stops the introduction of new technology, plain and simple. By its nature, and indeed by necessity, we currently have a policy of not adopting new generation technologies until technology has been widely adopted commercially elsewhere. Essentially, this legislation is not conducive to any sort of innovation. For Bermuda's electricity sector to evolve and usher in new forms of renewable energy, we must adopt legislation that mitigates the risk of creation, but not prevent it entirely. To be clear, in no way should Bermuda add any risk to the stability of our grid, rated independently as one of the best in the Caribbean region. Innovators will be scrutinized to ensure their credibility as investors and meet a series of requirements before being allowed to connect to the grid. And of course, working with the current utility who is licensed to operate the grid, of course, is a part of the process. Provided the requirements are met, they will have an opportunity to give power to Bermuda. With the proper safeguards, this change in legislation may not only invite energy investors to Bermuda, but also help lower energy costs overall, thereby increasing our appeal to investors in other areas, such as data centers or in the area of fintech. And in conclusion, everyone, the people in Bermuda have entrusted this government to lead. And with the throne speech theme working together to move Bermuda beyond the pandemic, I am confident, and I'm sure and certain I can speak for all of my colleagues, we are confident that these initiatives, once implemented, will fulfill that goal. Thank you very much. And I would now like to introduce you all to the Minister of Transport, Minister Lawrence Scott, who will give his presentation.
Thank you, Acting Premier. Good morning, everybody, and good morning to members of the media. As we continue to emerge from the pandemic, the Ministry of Transport will introduce new initiatives and strengthen existing programs by taking a contemporary approach to rebuilding Bermuda's economy. As it is stated in the throne speech, the tourism recovery will be aided by the Ministry of Transport, which will pursue an air service development policy to secure increased airlift from traditional gateway cities and increase Bermuda connectivity. In line with Bermuda's economic recovery plan, air service development is at the forefront of economic recovery. Over the course of the last 20 years, in which the Bermuda government had operational control over the airport, on average, Bermudians enjoyed over $40 million of airport-generated revenue annually. Until 2020, airlines had the financial availability to weather and shoulder our shoulder season. During this legislative year, working with the Bermuda Airport Authority and the Bermuda Tourism Authority, the ministry will explore every opportunity in which to reduce the risk associated with the Minimum Regulated Revenue Guarantee, or MRRG, to Skyport, which over the past 18 months has cost the taxpayers of this country more than $40 million. $19 million has been paid this calendar year alone, and this includes the most recent payment of $8,451,053.51. It should be noted that this does not include any other additional payments, which, for example, are the at least $160,000 per month, or a total of $2 million per year for electricity, and not to include the budgeted Air Service Development Fund, which costs additional millions every year, which under the project agreement is the responsibility of Skyport. We all rely on consistency when it comes to air travel and prefer the least number of connections while traveling to and from the island. We will work with both air service providers and airlines alike to provide increased frequency to core gateway cities and possibly open new air routes and passenger traffic for medical and sports tourism opportunities on island. The ministry is currently working with airlines and air service providers to deliver greater consistency to gateway cities in the United States, with the possibility to provide convenient connections to Midwest and West Coast cities. The 2022 cruise ship season is shaping up for a competitive return. The ministry is working with local cruise agents, and as of today, we have confirmed 180 cruise visits. We value the cruise ship industry and the economic impact it has on our economy. It is estimated that each cruise ship visit contributes approximately $1 million to our local economy. When it comes to public transportation, while the opposition has declared their intent to privatize this service, the ministry's focus is on working with and strengthening the relationship with our internal stakeholders. And when I speak about internal stakeholders, I mean our unions. This includes hiring additional bus operators to provide safe, consistent, and reliable service to our customers. In addition, the ministry is investing in and focusing on providing environmentally sound alternatives. The Ministry of Transport will continue to work with the Department of Energy to explore global and regional landscapes of zero-emission mobility and the opportunities it creates for Bermuda, including electric vehicles. A cross-ministry initiative is already underway with the government's Energy Transition Projects team, which includes the evolution of the public bus fleet to zero-emission vehicles. In February of 2022, 30 new all-electric buses will arrive on island. The Department of Public Transportation will bring these buses online to service our existing bus routes. The Department of Public Transportation is currently managing the request for proposals, or the RFP, process for the Fort Langton electric bus charging infrastructure, and has recently completed the RFP for the digital fare media on public buses and ferries. The Department of Transportation Control will continue modernizing the delivery of online services with digitally based options and operations for improving customer service by providing online options for our patrons. Sadly, this week we mark the 16th road fatality for the year, the highest number of deaths we have recorded since 2008. This statistic is very troubling. We must improve transportation safety on both our roads and waterways. I have asked Bermuda Road Safety Council and the Bermuda Water Safety Council to increase their public education campaigns regarding safety on our roads. Safety on our roads, safety on our waterways. And in the new year, we will announce enhanced policies and procedures for new road users seeking to obtain a license. We must do better. We must do a better job at saving Bermudian lives, and the government and the Bermuda Police Service cannot do it alone. We are our brother's keeper. Everyone must help us change the culture of speed and careless disregard for others on our road and waterways. The Ministry of Transport is determined to work diligently during this legislative session to bring efficiency and efficient modernized changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. At this time, we welcome the media to ask questions, and I ask that in asking those questions that you please keep it to the content of today's press conference. Thank you.
Hi, Sean Conley from the Royal Gazette. I haven't met you before, Minister. Nice to meet you. If I could start with you, Mr. Scott. As you stated there, 16 road deaths now. It looks like we're heading for an unfortunate record this year. Is it now time to refer to this as a national emergency?
That's a good question. And I don't know if it rises to the level of a national emergency, but I do think that it rises to the level in which it should be a priority, which it is for the Ministry of Transport. And what we are looking to do, we understand that this is that proverbial onion with multiple layers. There's no one size fits all, and there's no silver bullet. It's going to take all of us, as I said in my statement, it's going to take all of us to work together, to be very conscious of this, because it's ingrained in our culture. You know, I know from growing up here, once you go 16, it's all about getting a bike, getting out there, seeing who can make the biggest nip or the closest nip, or who can drag pop the longest. And that is a culture we have to rein back in. And that we, as the government, we, in conjunction with the Bermuda Police Service, cannot do it alone. And so going back to your question, it is a priority. But if we do nothing, and if things don't change, unfortunately, it could raise to the level that you've said of a national emergency.
Well, how many deaths does it take to be a national emergency then? Because we're at near record levels for 13 years. So, I mean, was it 20 deaths, 25?
I want to say that we don't want to, and we don't think that it is acceptable to lose anybody on our roads. And I think that we have to look at extenuating circumstances, because you could go back to 1975 when we had I think 20 to 25 deaths on our roads, but that was prior to the helmet law. And so would you have said that it was a national emergency back then at 25 deaths? I think that we can't put a number on making it a national emergency. It is whether we are able to put in the mitigating factors to change the trend, and instead of having an upward trend, to have a downward trend. And when we can no longer change that trend, I think that is when we should be able to, when we should start looking at it as a national emergency.
The Cayman Islands, similar population, they've had 8 road deaths this year. They've declared it a national emergency. So if they can show that level of urgency with such a major problem, why can't your government?
I think the Cayman Islands and Bermuda are two totally different jurisdictions with two totally different road infrastructures and two totally different governing the way and the uses thereof.
You're on about behaviours of driving, etc., particularly young people on bikes and such. Do you think the graduated licensing system, Project Ride, that type of thing, that needs to be reformed, as you know, that just seems to create a bubble where 16-year-olds can go out and do the things that you were saying, nipping and...
I smile because that is the direction that we're going right now. And as I mentioned in my statement, that we're looking at the policies and procedures in which one gets to obtain the license. And I think that this is a good way for me to segue. The culture that we have on our roads didn't just start today. It's not just under the PLP, it's not just under the OBA, it's not just under the UBP. This is something that is seemingly systemic. And I think it goes back to our training. The way you train individuals and the better quality of training that they have, the more prepared they are to go on our roads, the more you change that culture. Because it is not the 16 and 18-year-olds that are the majority of those losing their lives on the roads. If you look at the statistics, it's actually those that are had 15 to 20 years of experience. So it's your 30 to 40-year-olds that are losing their lives in the greater numbers. So it shows that when you come out, you actually have a good grasp and a good respect for the road. But it could be something that goes along with complacency. But if we improve the quality of education and don't just train our road users to pass a test, but to properly maneuver and operate a vehicle, we believe that that will help have a long-standing change in the trend that we're seeing now.
Okay, as part of that behavioural issue, would you agree that the DUI rules need to be tightened up, perhaps with tougher fines for repeat offenders?
I believe that, yes, DUI rules should become more strict, but we have to keep in mind that history has shown that the stricter the penalty doesn't necessarily mean a change in behavior. Once again, it goes to the culture, it goes to the mindset that we have. We have Bermudians that brag about how good of a driver or rider they are while they're intoxicated. That no matter what fine you get, you're still going to try. That mentality is what has to change.
Right. Could you give an example of how strict you would like to see it go then?
I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to speak of how strict off the top of my head. Once again, we have to look at all the extenuating circumstances, look at the historical data, and for me to just talk about a policy off the top of my head would be irresponsible.
Okay. You mentioned airlines and trying to get into mid-America and the West Coast. The Bermudians really, it would seem, really want to see the return of the Boston link. I mean, how are we doing with that? What kind of pressure is being levered to get that going again?
I wouldn't use the word pressure. I would
Incentive.
use the word partnership. We are leveraging our relationships within the industry to be able to provide more reliable and more consistent service to our core markets. Now, what does that mean? That means we are looking at the trends right now. We're reviewing all the trends, not just in our region, but globally, because we have to start looking at the different markets. There's an international travel market and a domestic travel market, which have two almost totally different variables that lead to their success and or their failures in different areas. So what we're doing now is we're working with air service providers and the airlines. We're working with both of them to see how we can best utilize them in conjunction with our air service development, which dovetails into the National Tourism Plan, so that we can have a wholesome, sustainable, and efficient and effective way forward.
Would your aim be to see the Boston link restored next year?
Beg your pardon?
Would your aim be to have the Boston link back next year, Airlink?
Yes. As of right now, we are on track to have Boston connectivity restored by the end of March.
All right. Okay. That's good. On the subject, would you agree that the COVID protocols are a bit of a deterrent for visitors to the country? They're just putting people off.
Would it be a deterrent? I don't think that it's a deterrent in the sense of I think that the government's priority is keeping our people safe. If you notice that, yes, Bermuda has been more strict than other jurisdictions, from the beginning, but now the other jurisdictions are following the Bermuda model. So is it a deterrent, or are we setting the bar? I choose to say we are setting the bar.
Okay,
But I
finally-
do admit
also.
that, I do admit, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do admit that we do have to work on, and we are working on, streamlining the process so that we are more user-friendly to air visitors.
Streamline in what way?
Right now, we're looking at other jurisdictions, we're trying to see is, are we able to accept antigen tests for arrival versus PCR tests for arrival? We understand that right now it is in other jurisdictions, although our testing capacity is world leading, other jurisdictions don't enjoy that luxury or that benefit. And so we have to now see what testing regimes, what testing opportunities or avenues they have that are readily available to the mass public and that meet our level of oversight.
Thank you, Minister.
Just one final question on that, on transport. Where are we at with speed cameras? We've been talking about them for 25 years, and when are they going to happen, or are they going to happen?
I believe at this time, we are making progress with speed cameras. Speed cameras are part of Operation Caution, and Operation Caution is to be completed by 2023, so we are not behind on the implementation of speed cameras. But we do admit that we have to work a bit faster and a bit better with them moving forward, and we are doing a joint initiative with the Ministry of National Security.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mr. Roban, it's nice to see you in person. We spoke on Zoom when you were in Glasgow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the single-use plastic ban proposals, there seems to be quite a pushback on that from people, companies, etc. Do you think that they might be watered down? It is quite a hardline regime that you're proposing.
Well, I'd like you to tell me who's pushing back. I have not seen that. I know that we just finished the consultation process, and every business has had an opportunity to contribute to that. And I would be interested to know what you mean by pushback, because at this point, we are in a proposal form of which we put out for consultation. So everybody who consulted is actually contributing to the development of the policy. So what they have received is what we've laid out. We are giving them an opportunity to actually contribute to the development of that process. And we will review all of their submissions, and then that will shape what is ultimately brought out. And as you would know, it's a phased process as well. So I'd be interested to know who you're referring to as pushing back, because there's nothing for them to push back on.
Okay.
There is merely a proposal for them to make their contributions on, and they have a first-line role with shaping what comes out in the end.
You don't think Bermuda's trying to go too far too fast then?
No, because there are other jurisdictions that have already deployed single-use plastic legislation all through the Caribbean in particular. Most of the islands, Barbados, Antigua, I can go down the list, have already put in place, like Jamaica, already have single-use plastics banned. So we are taking an approach ourselves that we believe is appropriate for Bermuda, but many jurisdictions similar to us have already deployed single-use plastic bans.
Yeah, you mentioned, thanks, you mentioned wind farms in your statement. So where exactly are we with that creation now of that kind of clean energy?
Wind is a component in the integrated resource plan. It will be offshore wind, so no issue with it being on land. And at the moment, the regulatory authority is going through a process of finalizing a industry-grade assessment on, which is typically called a wind study, to assess where and what type of configuration a wind farm would look like. The goal in the IRP is to have in the area of 60 megawatts of wind.
Okay.
So like the regulatory authority can give you more information on their
Yeah.
work, because they are principally the ones doing the work on the specifications and technical aspects of a wind farm or proposed 60 megawatt wind farm.
On rooftop solar power, that project, could you put a bit more flesh on the bones for me on that?
Yes, we of course are very supportive of what is called distributed solar, which is solar on either residential or commercial rooftops. And we're actually doing work with the planning department and with the energy department to actually incorporate in the planning regime a framework that will allow that to be more efficiently put in place with developments going forward. The process is already pretty user-friendly for doing that, and but we are looking at a number of different options on how that will be sort of, I guess, further expanded in Bermuda. We are looking at options on identifying areas where commercial utility scale solar can be deployed throughout the island. And we're also developing a plan on how we can ensure that solar is available to those who can least afford the systems at this point. Almost anywhere on the world, deploying a residential solar system is expensive. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in North America, anywhere. We're looking for ways that we can have a more community-based approach with deployment that will allow greater access by those who cannot afford the investment, but they will have the opportunity to take advantage of renewable energy. So we're looking at options for like utility scale, but also how we can have a community-based approach where greater members of the community who can least afford it will have access to solar as well.
How would you envisage it if a company or an individual, they have a power outage from the solar? Would they be able to just plug into the grid again?
Well, that is something that will be addressed in future legislation, that a person can have and like an arrangement with the provider of utility power like Belco, and that if they have a disruption in their operation, they can still plug into their to what the utility is providing. But that will be more, has to do with what a power purchase, with an agreement between the utility and the consumer. That will be how things will be developed going forward. But it also means perhaps some other changes that have to be made from an infrastructure standpoint with upgrading of the grid that can allow that sort of operation as well. It's not a straightforward thing, even under the current grid, unlike grid configuration. So as more people adopt solar and get used to it, the grid has to be able to accommodate and adapt to that sort of usage, which is not what it's built for in total right now.
Right. Finally, thanks. Finally, where are we at with the testbed alternative energy project scheme attraction?
I spoke of that in my statement. I am quite pleased with the progress of that. Recently took a paper to the cabinet, which the cabinet supported. So we're now in the process of making the legislative changes that will allow for the what we call the regulatory sandbox to exist, that will invite and create a space for renewable energy, innovative renewable energy technologies to be deployed in Bermuda. And as I did also state in my statement, I will next week be introducing a partner who has already made themselves available to be a part of that regulatory sandbox, a innovative new technology opportunity that they want to bring to Bermuda in the area of renewable energy. So we're already here. There is legislative changes that have to be made to create the sandbox, but there are already people here ready to bring their innovation to Bermuda, and we're excited about that. And
Sorry, go on.
I won't tell you that.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you that when I announce it next week.
Okay. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you all for attending. Ministers, do you have any closing remarks?
Yes, I'm very excited by the types of opportunities that, one, the throne speech has created for my ministry to bring not only the energy innovation, but the legislative changes, which we actually are trying to ensure are people-focused, whether it be the landlord and tenant changes, and the other initiatives that we have outlined that we believe will deal with some of the issues that are of concern to the average people, like their relationship with their landlords and being able to have access to good housing. We also are keen to address the issues of the cost of energy. That is something that every resident, irrespective of whether you're wealthy or not wealthy, you're dealing with a 39 cent per kilowatt hour price of energy, which is one of the highest in the world. We need to bring that down, and our efforts to deal with the fuel surcharge and the regulatory, a greater regulatory on like the pricing of fuel, we believe we can begin to properly deal with those issues, just like they're dealt with in other like countries. So we're not doing anything different here. We're actually perhaps creating a more modernized framework to address costs in that area, along with costs in other areas. But fuel is attached to everything. Energy is attached to everything. The cost of energy influences everything. So we're looking forward to dealing with that and working with excited about my colleague, Minister of Transport, with his electrification of transport. That also has a positive to our renewable energy future of having energy security and cleaner and safer environment on the environment side, because if we can lower the like emissions from cars, we will clean up Bermuda in ways that will make it more healthy for everybody. So I laud the efforts of the Minister of Transport in that, because they're also connected to the renewable energy side and helping to bring down the cost for everybody. So I'm proud of my initiatives, and I'm proud of what the government is doing with all the initiatives that we've outlined with the Economic Recovery Plan and with, for this year. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe that what you're going to see this year is a better collaboration and cross-ministerial working together. You're going to see more ministries working together than you have before, and this is in the interest of providing future success to all Bermudians, but with a focus on small businesses and entrepreneurs, while singly the Ministry of Transport is laser focused on restoring connectivity to our gateway cities, but also putting in a air service development strategy that takes into consideration the impact that both international and domestic travel has had based on COVID.
Thank you very much, ministers, and thank you for the media and the public for joining us. And that is the end of our press conference. Have a great day.